What's up, beautiful people? Maria here. Just making a little video on narcissism and empathy, or the narcissist and the empath. It's something that it's a concept, I should say, that I have been navigating and observing for the last few years on my own healing journey. And then just kind of observing it in the collective, how it is portrayed in the collective, how different people kind of teach the concept. And I know Sam and I have talked about this in probably our podcast and other videos we've made, but I feel that it warrants a repeat and kind of a video of its own. I think this was something that I was actually gonna make a video on like last year and never did. And maybe it's because I still had to navigate more of my own inner journey in kind of understanding this concept, or at least my perspective of it. And so, first and foremost, I want to just start with like the labels, right? Calling someone a narcissist or calling someone an empath, right? They're labels. That's all they are. And essentially, a label is a judgment, right? Good, bad, and different. It's a judgment. And it is limiting to identify with labels. And so for me, I never was able to actually call someone a narcissist. And even the word empath, even when like I was told I was an empath, it, I don't know, the label just didn't resonate in the sense that I felt like I could truly identify with it. And I think the reason behind that is because each of us carries an inner narcissist and an inner empath. Um, and to me, it's really just the ego and the higher self when I break it down. When I break down the energies of what is narcissism, and what is empathy. Well, empathy to me is aligned with love, unconditional love, or the energy of our higher self, our spirit, our soul. And then the narcissism is more in line with our ego, the human parts of us, right? The judgmental parts of us. Um, and so for me, I've never been able to call someone a narcissist, even though I have absolutely dealt with people in my life that um, emanate narcissistic tendencies, narcissistic behaviors. I still will never call these people narcissists because I think it's a very disempowering label to throw on anyone. And when I can really recognize what is driving the narcissism, I recognize that I also have narcissistic tendencies within me. Because really, what is it rooted in? It's rooted in fear. What is the ego basically controlled by? Fear. What is empathy rooted in? Empathy is rooted in unconditional love. Like I said, the energy of source, creator, God, our soul. And so, legit, newsflash for everyone, we all carry narcissistic tendencies within us, and we all carry empathic tendencies within us, right? That's the duality of this game. That is the duality of a spirit being a human. And it's interesting because this morning I listened to a webinar with Danny Morell, who I absolutely love because his teachings are super aligned with just my own inner journey these last, like 7+ years. And he talked about this exact thing about how labeling people as narcissists is not only disempowering for the person you're throwing that label on, but also yourself. And what I have observed, especially the last just couple of years that I've really been paying attention, tuning into the collective and the sort of collective narratives that are coming up for all of us as we're each navigating different awakenings, right? Individually and collectively. And there's so much out there that is geared towards the wounded empath, meaning there are so many teachings out there from spiritual teachers, psychologists, therapists, you name it, that all talk about this concept in a way that there is blame and shame being placed on the narcissist that took advantage of the empath, right? And I've never really seen it that way personally, because I understand energy. And what I mean by that is everything is energy in this game that we call life. Everything that we see and don't see has an energetic vibration that brings it into existence. Our thoughts are energy, our emotions are energy, things that we can physically touch are energy. Everything is energy, and everything carries its own vibration, its own frequency. And so with that understanding, I know that a wounded empath, meaning someone that identifies as an empath but is still very much in a victimized mindset, that is pointing fingers at the narcissist, right? That wounded empath has the same energies within them that the narcissist does. And that is why the wounded empath has attracted this narcissistic individual into their life, right? When you start to become more of what I would refer to as a empowered empath, you see this very clearly. You recognize that it is our own wounding inside, our own insecurities, our own feelings of lack of self-worth, um, lack of self-love, lack of self-respect. Because we have those so deeply rooted into us that came from generations, right? Generations, but have been very much a program in us since we were kids, right? Well, because the majority of us are carrying that, guess what? From an energetic perspective, we're going to attract that energy into our life as well. Now, a behavior, we'll say, of someone who is in maybe a narcissistic way of being may appear differently than those that are perceiving themselves to be an empathic sort of way of being. But when you really drum it down, both people are drowning in fear consciousness, fear energy. And both people are maybe operating differently or expressing themselves differently through different behaviors. But from an energetic standpoint, it is still fear that is driving both individuals' choices and unconsciousness. So if you're someone that's listening to this that feels that they are an empath, that has had nothing but narcissists in their life, right? And I don't say this with judgment. It's merely observation of my own navigation of this concept, but also all the people that I coach and do healings and readings for. I would say 95% of the people that come to me self-identify as an empath that is a victim of narcissism, narcissistic abuse, whether it's their parents, their spouse, their boyfriend, their girlfriend, their friends, their kids, whatever, right? They all come with the same story, that they are an empath and all they do in their life is attract narcissists, right? So right off the bat, all I hear with that is fear attracting fear, right? I take the label out. And so especially in coaching, I really try to guide people to this awareness, right? I share my perspective, but it's more or less they have to recognize this, right? Because that's taking your power back. That is recognizing that there's actually no one to blame in anything, right? And that's a really, really hard thing for our ego, our human self to swallow and to accept. But when you can really get to a state of healing within yourself and awareness within yourself, it's really awareness, personally, I think. Um, you realize there's no one to blame for anything that's happened to us, okay? And there's going to be people that watch this that are going to like resist this concept tooth and nail, and that, you know, if we're a victim of like a heinous crime, like how did we attract that into our life? Well, I'm here to tell you that we attract into our life that which we are a vibrational match with. That's really quantum physics. That's really just how life works. Now, with that said, because the majority of us are operating off of 95% of our subconscious by the time we're 35 years old. Thank you, Dr. Joe Dispenza, for um, throwing that statistic out there. And it's true. So just think about that concept for a second too, that by the time we're 35 years old, right, we're literally showing up in the world off of 95% of programming of our subconscious mind, meaning only 5% of our consciousness is awake, is aware. So essentially, that's saying that we're like robots by the time we're 35, right? And our subconscious mind, which is always running, always on, even when our body is sleeping, our subconscious mind is always on, and it's always recording the external environment, no matter what's happening. The subconscious mind also does not know how to discern truth from untruth, fiction from nonfiction. It's just like a recorder, basically, that you just have the record button on 24/7 from the time you enter this game to the time you leave. And it's just taking in all of this information. So that even means that trauma that we didn't actually experience in this body, but that the mind heard, guess what? It doesn't know the difference. So there's a part of us that thinks that we actually experienced that trauma. And that could be something we watched on TV. That could be something we read in a book. It could be a conversation we heard down the hall, right? That our subconscious mind is taking that in as information, processing it, and basically saying, this is my reality kind of thing. So with that said, we're walking around pretty unconscious. It's just, that's just what it is, right? It's not good, bad, right, wrong. It's just the reality of this game. So when you start to realize that, you go, whoa, I'm actually walking around with a ton of unconscious trauma, fear, limiting beliefs, programs that my conscious mind is not even aware of. But energetically, I'm putting that vibration out to the world around me, out to the universe. And so guess what I get in return? Somewhat of a mirror of that energy, right? I get fear consciousness. I get insecurity. I get anxiety. I get anger projected at me. Why? Because I'm carrying it inside me, but I don't even know. And we're really good. Let me put it this way. Our egos are really good at deceiving us, lying to us, manipulating us, because the ego does not like to feel uncomfortable. It does not like to be wrong about anything. It doesn't like pain and suffering. So it tries to protect us from those things, right? The ego is not a bad thing. It's literally part of the human avatar and the human experience. But if we're unaware of when our ego is controlling how we show up in the world, well, let me tell you, that's when we live a life that we feel that we're not creating, that life is like happening to us, right? Like we're always a victim of something. We're always a victim of, I don't know, people stealing from us, people lying to us. We're a victim of narcissism, right? Well, the more you live in that victimized mindset and believe that to be true, your external reality will absolutely validate that for you. And your ego will continue to go on through life thinking it's always right. Because in a sense, it is, because it believes what it believes. And because we live in an energy game and a quantum universe, well, energetically, we're going to create externally what we believe inside. So this is why a big part of my coaching that I do with people is identifying their limiting beliefs, right? And to me, a limiting belief is essentially anything that we hold to be true about ourselves or the world that disempowers us, right? That forces us, well, I don't say it forces us, but we give our power away to these limiting beliefs. And so if you believe that you're a victim of narcissists all the time, you're going to continue to attract people that emanate that behavior, right? When you start to look at what inside of you is attracting that, that's where you slowly start to take your power back. And it's baby steps, right? It's being able to look at these things within yourself without judgment. Um, and then when you do that, that's where that acceptance starts to come in, right? You go, wow, my wounded energy attracted their wounded energy. And that's really what it comes down to, right? We use the word toxic a lot, which is like another word that, I don't know, always had kind of a hard time with that as well, because I believe that toxic people don't exist, first of all. I believe toxic behavior does, but really, what is toxic behavior? It's wounded energy that is rooted in fear, trauma, pain, insecurity, fear. It's fear. So to me, the only like labels that I really can resonate with using are love and fear, because to me, those are the polar opposite energies that we're playing with in this earth game. Now, from an even higher perspective, love and fear are actually all one and the same thing. But for sake of the game that we're in and talking about what I'm talking about, we have love and fear here. And so it's being able to look at yourself and say, where am I operating off of fear? Because the more I become aware of that, it doesn't mean that now you just become this like fearless individual, right? I don't actually believe that that is the intent of this at all. Because I have recognized and accepted that fear is a very, very potent teacher. It's so powerful. And so I accept it as an energy that we chose to play in this game. So I don't ever feel like I'm going to be a fearless individual while I'm playing in this game. However, in being able to recognize, acknowledge, and start to face my fears, that's where the magic happens. Scary as fuck and super uncomfortable, but it's super freeing and empowering, because now you're making a conscious choice to not let fear control you anymore. That's a game changer. Again, it does not mean that you still won't make fear-based decisions. There's still times in my daily life where I make a choice that I know is actually rooted in fear, but I'm consciously doing it. And that's free will. That's basically the concept of free will. It's saying I have this path I can choose, or this path I can choose, or this path I can choose, right? It could be more than two paths. But I'm aware that I have these different choices in front of me. And I'm still not quite ready to face this insecurity, this fear. And so I'm gonna kind of stay in this situation, or I'm gonna, whatever it is, right? Not make a different choice yet because I'm not ready. That is still being a conscious individual and more empowered than the person that is literally just operating off of unconscious fear, because you're still making a conscious choice that is the experience you're going to play out for however long you choose to play it out, because you're only going to be ready when you're ready. And I know this from my own experience. You'll only be ready to leave the job, the relationship, the location, whatever it is. You'll only be ready when you're ready. No one can force that on you. No one can make you do it, right? Like, you'll know when you're ready. And it's okay if today is not that day. But if you're conscious about it, if you're consciously choosing that, you're still taking your power back. because you're still making a choice based off of free will that someone who's way less self-aware is doing robotically, thinking they don't have a choice. And that's the big difference about starting to become more conscious. You start to become aware of all of the choices that are available to us here in this quantum reality, which, mind you, is limitless. Okay, we literally live in a limitless quantum reality in this physical reality, but we've been programmed to believe that everything is limited. So that's why being able to break out of limiting beliefs is so empowering. And that's when you start to become that conscious creator, right? So, roundabout way of coming back to the narcissist and the empath, okay? We all embody an energy of narcissism, fear, control, manipulation. Control and manipulation are just behaviors that we do as humans because we're living in a state of fear. And we all do it. I encourage you to listen to Sam and my most recent podcast, which was now a little over a month ago that we did, but it was all about the energy of manipulation. And the more you can recognize when you manipulate in life, the more you'll recognize when you're being manipulated by other people, right? But it also allows you to have empathy for yourself and other people, because when you realize that the root of manipulation and control is fear, you open your heart to that, and you recognize it's not personal. It really isn't. Everything we experience here, especially from other people, is not personal. Now, it can feel personal as fuck when you're in these situations, right? But it's vibrational. It's energy. It's projection of unconsciousness, which is why I'm such a huge proponent on shadow work. It's like, how do we evolve as individuals without shadow work? You can't. Because all shadow work is making the unconscious conscious. That's all shadow work is. So yeah, is it a deep dive into traumas? Yep, it sure the fuck is. But when you break it down, shadow work is just bringing our unconscious parts to our conscious awareness. So guess what else is also shadow work? Tapping into our spiritual gifts. And I do it like that because we're all spirits. So, I mean, we can call it a gift if that's, what our human likes to call it, but it's just who we are. It's actually our most pure and natural state is our spirit, right? And we all have the same spiritual gifts because we're all spirit walking in a body. We're all connected to that one single source. So we all have all of the clairs out there: clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, claircognizance. Like, we all have it. But if we're unconscious, if we're living day to day in a state of unconscious fear all the time, which that was me for a majority of my life, very aware of that, you won't tap into those gifts. That's why I say shadow work is the light work, because it is. It's not all dark and scary. There's so much medicine within that darkness if you're willing to go there, right? But fear is afraid of itself. So fear is afraid to face the dark. But love is not afraid of anything. Love embodies all realities, all truths. So it fears nothing, right? So that's, when I talk about love, I'm not talking about love, the emotion that we've all been programmed to believe. I'm not talking about really the conditional kind of love that we play out for the most part here. I'm talking about the energy of unconditional love, which is it's a totally different concept than the romanticized love that we see in the movies and read in the books and dish out on Valentine's Day. It's an energy. that lives inside every single one of us. But because of the way that we have been brainwashed from the start, and because of society's expectations and our own wounding, that love is in a sense hidden, even though it's always right there. But this mind of ours, right, our beautiful mind, which is it's a beautiful thing, the mind, but it can also be damaging if we're operating off the wounded mind all the time, which the majority of us still are. We, as a collective, are awakening 100%, but there is still a lot of unconscious wounding that is being projected back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So that's why, again, knowing thyself is the most important part of the journey. Because when you know thyself, you know everything outside of you, because you know that thyself is related to and connected to everything that we perceive to be outside of us. So know your demons and know your angels, because then you'll see them more clearly when they're presenting themselves in external experiences, and you'll probably navigate it a little bit differently when you can see it as an aspect of you, right? That's truly taking your power back. So I really encourage any of you that listen to this that are still pointing your fingers at narcissists. I encourage you to maybe stop. Perhaps there's another way you can acknowledge narcissistic behavior without labeling someone as a narcissist. That's all I'm really saying. It's because that label, it's essentially you're casting a spell on that person. You're sending negative energy at a situation or an individual that's already drowning in negative energy here, because you are still in your wounding and pointing the finger and blaming them for you being a victim of that abuse or that experience, right? And so you're not empowering yourself by any means by pointing that finger. And what I would encourage you to do is when you recognize narcissistic behavior coming up externally, stop for a minute, a day, a week, whatever it is, to reflect on what inside of you, what insecurity, what fear, what belief has attracted that experience into your life, because it didn't just happen for no reason. And what I would really encourage you to do is really look at your self-worth, because the majority of us don't have much self-worth, much self-respect. And that's just being a product of this game. I mean, you look around at society and where we are literally programmed to not have worthiness within us, that we're always seeking something in the material world to fill that void, that we don't feel worthy or deserving of love, of a happy, fulfilling life, of health, right? These are all things that are within reach for all of us. But if we don't believe that we are deserving of it or worthy of it, we will never, ever create that for ourselves. So it starts with first believing that you're worthy as fuck. And why aren't you? We all are. Every single one of us is worthy of living our best life. But we have to get out of our own way to do that. And that really just means taking honest, introspective looks at ourselves and at our human behavior. So maybe instead of labeling people off of their human behavior, because that is not who they are, the people in your lives that you're calling a narcissist, that's not who they are. They are a human that also has a lot of love inside of them, but it is buried, buried, buried deep under a lot of trauma and wounding and toxicity and fear. Can you look at that narcissist through the eyes of an empath and say, I see you. I love you. I don't have to tolerate your projection onto me. And the more I'm recognizing that, the less that's going to be an external experience, right? Because now you're starting to see your own internal worth. And so those situations will become less and less because, again, we attract into our life that which we are a vibrational match for. So can you start to look at the narcissists through the lens of your empowered empath and still say, I love you? But because I now know my own self-worth, I'm going to start setting boundaries. So I'm not allowing, because understand, as a wounded empath, we're allowing others to project onto us, to abuse us, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, however. We're allowing it. We have co-created that experience. We have basically signed an agreement, a contract, subconsciously, unconsciously, semi-consciously, with these other individuals that are saying like, hey, yeah, I'm gonna attract that in because that's also the energy I'm giving out. And it's fear. It's fear, people. It's all fear. That's what it is. So can you take an honest look at your fears, your insecurities? Can you look at the things you judge? Because judgment is all rooted in fear. Can you look at the narcissist and love them? But can you look at yourself and love yourself enough to not allow that kind of projection onto you? Start reflecting. Start taking your power back. Stop labeling people, please. Stop labeling yourself and stop labeling other people. It's insane to me the amount of teachings out there now that are all about, this like, it's like the shaming of the narcissist. And it's like, that's the exact energy that someone that's exuding narcissism is already drowning in. And then you've got all these teachings that are basically pointing the finger and shaming that. And guess what? That's only going to make that energy grow. We have to learn to love these energies, right? And when I say learn, I really mean remember, because our soul is love, right? It's the human part of us that's needs to break out of the separation, the division. So hopefully that helps anybody that might be navigating situations of narcissism and empathy. Once again, we all carry both energies within us. I encourage you to pay attention to when you are emanating narcissistic tendencies, which really is just manipulation and control. Where are you trying to control people, manipulate people, or situations because of your own fear? Because that's narcissism. Where are you forgiving, accepting, and loving people? Because that's empathy, right? So the narcissist and the empath lives within each of us. I encourage us all to begin to love both parts so that they can integrate into one whole being. Hope that helps. Love ya.